Hello and welcome to another episode of Kwesi's Corner with me, the notorious Kwesi, with this guy, the legendary Michael Thomas from Roland. Thank you for coming once again. Today we're going to be talking about the similarities or the differences between the Roland SPD-SX and the TM6 Pro. You'll see more of that up next. So, we're here today to find out about the similarities or differences, I guess, between the TM6 Pro and the SPD-SX. I have been in a quandary, personally, as to what I should be choosing because I play for a particular artist and I use this. Mm-hmm. This is fixed to my bass drum. However, I want to lug one of those around for my personal projects. So maybe, as well as enlightening myself, you can enlighten the guys out here how we would go about picking the right product for the right situation.
The main audience for the sample pad, for the SPD-SX, is those who want to import their own samples, be that backing tracks, additional kick sounds, snare sounds, things like that. Because it has two stereo trigger inputs or four mono trigger inputs. So that means you can connect external pads such as PDX6, PDX8, PDX 100s, or so the RT30 range, the RT10 range. So to enhance your bass drum sound, to add a clap sound to your snare drum, things like that, your own samples you can import into here. So the SPD-SX is, like you mentioned earlier, it's bigger, but it does have 9 playable pads. So you can assign a sample to either one of these 9 pads, and they also have a sub layer as well. So essentially you can have 2 layers of sounds. So similar to the TD50 and the TD17 work, where you can layer samples, but you can do that on here. A lot of people on the layers, they have their main track on the pad, and then they have on the sub track their click track, and they route their click track through the sub outs into their in-ears or into a main mixer desk, which then routes to the whole band. It has 4 onboard effects as well, which can be used in real time, and you can control in real time using the 2 control knobs here. It has a separate headphone output as well, so everything will be routed through the headphones, whether that's the sub track or the main track. It's also got MIDI capabilities, it's got 5-pin MIDI in and out, as well as USB in and out.
What would you say would be the perfect situation for this to be used in? Obviously, it's been used very much in a big way by performing artists / session drummers / percussionists in small and big venues. Would it be viable for the average gigging drummer or even home use?
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, it's got 5-pin MIDI in and out, and USB computer connectivity, so you can essentially use this as a MIDI controller for DAWs such as Ableton, Logic, Pro Tools, anything like that.
Indeed.
The SPD-SX is used across stages across the world. Like you watch Glastonbury, Radio 1 Festival, Reading and Leeds, there will be bands on there, hands down, that use SPD-SX.
Okay. So definitely a staple there, guys. So up next we have the TM6 Pro. I'm very excited to know a bit more about this.
So this is the TM6 Pro. As the name suggests, you have 6 trigger inputs for external pads or triggers. They can be split into mono triggers as well, which means that then that expands the TM6 Pro to 12. So that simply means that rather than have a head and rim per trigger input, you can have just head triggers. So rather than have 6, you have 12. The main difference between this and the SPD-SX, like you mentioned earlier, are the 9 playing pads.
Right.
This doesn't have any playing pads at all.
Standard.
There are these trigger pads here.
Right.
But they're simply touch pads.
Okay.
They're not velocity sensitive. You can use them on a gig if you wanted to, but they're simply just there for really editing features, editing purposes even. It works really exactly like the TD17 module in regards to you can also have layers. So, for example, your kick sound, you could have a top layer and a bottom layer, and to really beef it up, blend the two together. The settings work exactly the same as TD17 with regards to whether you have a mix or different individual fades. It has hi-hat control as well, which the SPD-SX doesn't. So that simply means you can have open and closed hi-hats, and you can actively control the open and closed hi-hats, whereas on the SPD-SX it doesn't have that feature.
Also, with the triggers here, you said that they were not touch sensitive on here.
Yeah.
When you actually attach it to a pad, does that pad actually become touch sensitive?
Yeah. So when you connect either pads or triggers, they will be velocity sensitive, and they will react to how hard or how light you play the drum.
In regards to outputs and inputs, what do we have on this?
We have 4 direct outputs, which are totally assignable within the module.
Okay.
So that simply means if I want my kick and snare to come out of one direct output, which gives the front of house engineer, or if you want to input them separately into a mixing desk, you can do that by just assigning the kick and snare, or trigger inputs 1 and 2 to come out of particular direct outs. And everything on this module is assignable. So all these 6 trigger inputs can be assigned to come out of wherever you want. The click track can be assigned to come out wherever you want, and so can the song. You've got 2 master outputs as well, a right and a left, and a headphone output as well. So needless to say, a headphone output, you can monitor everything that is being output from the TM6 Pro. And then also on the side you have a computer output, which again you can hook up to a computer to trigger Ableton loops, or anything for Logic, things like that. You also have a MIDI out, which again you can hook up to any 5-pin MIDI input device, and again control that MIDI device using the MIDI data of the TM6 Pro.
You can also obviously upload your own user samples on this.
Yeah, that's right. So there are 500 inbuilt samples initially. Right. But you can import another 500 of your own 44.1 kilohertz 16-bit samples on the TM6 Pro. Yeah.
Okay. You personally, have you found this more useful than this? Now you've been messing with that in your particular situation.
Personally, I have, yes, because I take hybrid into consideration when I'm personally playing. So I need the additional trigger inputs. So I have 3 mesh pads to my left, and I also have kick and snare trigger as well. So rather than have to mess around with any microphones, I use literally my triggers as microphones and then use them through this. I don't actually use that anymore, because I put all my backing tracks onto SD card, and then I can load them into the TM6 Pro, and I can see what I'm actually selecting. So what track we're going to next play, I can visually see on the LCD screen here, rather than on the SPD-SX. Figure out which of the 9 pads the next track we're going to play is, and hope for the best. I've got a visual representation of what track we're actually going to play here.
I have been using this because the guy that I work for has it. That's the only reason. So I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, okay, just for portability purposes, if it does the same thing, I might veer towards that. However, what would you say, obviously apart from the pads, were the pluses when it comes to SPD?
The plus where it comes to SPD is pretty much that it has the built-in pads, that it has an onboard memory. So rather than have to carry around an SD card or leave the SD card in here, I can trust this to retain the memory. Okay. So rather than having to scroll through tracks and rely on having an SD card with me and a backup SD card just in case one breaks, for example, I can load all the backing tracks in here. you know, my SPD-SX personally has never failed me. You know, it's never wiped its memory, things like that. It does still come on gigs with me as a backup in case this ever goes down, in case I lose an SD card, which with myself will inevitably happen. So then I can just whack out the SPD-SX, whack it on a stand, and then I'll figure my way out, you know, where the tracks are situated.
So there you have it, guys. A really concise kind of rundown on both the TM6 Pro and the SPD-SX from a pro. Thanks for watching. We hope this has been helpful to you. Maybe you guys can make a decision as to what you would want. Would the SPD-SX be more of what fits your needs, or indeed the TM6 Pro? Let us know in the comments below. Like, subscribe as usual, and without further ado, we'd like to say goodbye. Thank you, Michael. Nice one.
Thanks, man.
And we will see you again soon. Take care.